What is up, everybody? Welcome to another live edition of Deep Look. I'm Charlie Eisenhood, editor of Ultiworld. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner. It's not Tuesday, it is Wednesday. Sorry we missed you yesterday, but Keith was traveling, I was traveling. It just wasn't going to happen. So we moved it to Wednesday. Plenty to talk about. Today's episode is going to be devoted entirely to the Luka trade. Keith, you are an NBA fiend. Tell me about where were you when you found out, and how are you feeling?
Unexciting location. I mean, I woke up and looked at my phone, and there were just like tons of notifications. And like basically everybody else I've heard tell this story, my first reaction was like, this is not a real thing that's happening. But I happened to like get into it late enough that it seemed like it was already pretty firmed up. And then I've basically been consuming content about that trade every day since, like, almost, bookending my days trying to figure out what the heck happened. I have trouble thinking of anything that's happened in sports that like feels less explainable than this.
I
Or more explainable.
Today I reached the point where I started Googling like contrarian takes about the Luka trade just to see like, are there people who are like saying like this is actually. I found a couple things. Like, there's definitely at least some thought. I mean, Shaq on Inside the NBA said that he thinks the Mavs will be better off for the next couple seasons. The thing is, it's just what is so crazy is the complete malpractice that was done by the Mavs in terms of getting like this basically the smallest possible return for a player of Luka's caliber. It's truly stunning. Like, how many first round picks should it have included along with AD if you were going to make this trade? Right? Is it 3?
All of them. Like not
Like,
even
available.
Everyone's the entire the draft. The Mavs should have just drafted for the entire first round. Like they should get 1 through 30. It's
God.
unbelievable. I just can't. I that's the hardest part. Like I can understand like being like, okay, we know that Luka's not the right fit to take us to a title. So we're going to shock everybody and move him. I think you can make a constructive argument for that. It doesn't make sense to do it now. It doesn't make sense to accept this return. It doesn't make any sense. This is, trading away Chloe Akimi for you and me. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, the only thing crazier is Pavel Giannis dipping out of a 6-year contract with the LA Aviators early to go back to Chicago.
I can't believe
it's really wild.
He's got to pay some money back to them, right?
I was on vacation the last few days, and I like checked my phone at one point. I was barely on my phone, and I was like, whoa, wait. And then I like spent an hour at the beach, just like reading about the Luka stuff and like trying to process everything. Crazy stuff. Got a lot to get to today. We are going to be talking about Florida warm-up. So much to discuss. 2 undefeated teams. So we will get to that. Edward Stevens will be joining us in just a little bit to break everything down. He was in Gainesville, not Tampa, because of course the tournament moved. And kind of an interesting warm-up year. So we'll save our discussion for when we get to that. First up, though, we have our trivia question of the week.
All right, I'm excited for this one. Charlie has no idea about this question, but I wanted to see what he does with it, because this trivia question is about Deep Look. Charlie, today's trivia question: who was the first guest to appear on the Deep Look podcast?
This is all time, not in the Keith era.
No, this is all the way. This is the first episode I could find with a guest.
Oh, man. Okay, so the podcast started around November 2012, if I recall correctly. It was a couple months after we started the website. And at the time, it was me and Wes Kronk, one of the OG Ultiworld folks. And I'm trying to think of like what we were really talking about at the time. So it was wintertime. We were coming into the college season, so it's plausible that it was a college person, but we knew nothing about the college scene. There was UFA, or at the time at UDL drama, MLU drama. I will guess that it was. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna guess Tim DeBile.
You're in the neighborhood. It was a person from the then AUDL. And it was, so you're right, is November 2012. This is actually the second episode of Deep Look. You were joined by Josh Moore, then the
Oh, we got
president and
Josh
commissioner
Moore.
and founder of the AUDL,
What a
who I
get.
don't even think made it to this next season. I think Rob Lloyd stepped in the next year, but yeah, you had Josh Moore as the first guest on Deep Look podcast.
That's wild. What a get in episode number 2. Josh Moore. I have no recollection of that interview, to be honest. I don't have a great memory just in general about this kind of stuff, so I'm not surprised, but it makes sense.
And now there's a Josh Moore. I think I don't actually guess I don't know if he's still in the league, but there was a Josh Moore on Portland. I'm pretty sure. Different guy.
Different Josh Moore.
I also think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. Definitely. That is very interesting. I mean, it's such a different world back then. Like a lot of people who listen to this podcast probably don't even know who Josh Moore is, but he was selling franchises on Craigslist.
Classic. A classic.
Couple sold for $1. What are they worth now? I don't know.
I mean, that might have been the only way to not lose money in in Pro Ultimate. Would have been to buy a team for $1.
Brent Russell in the chat since removed his comment, but he said he was a Laker fan and a little concerned about Luka's physical conditioning. I get. I've heard a couple Laker fans already kind of like worrying about this, but I don't know. To me, it makes sense for the Lakers. Like, don't you want to be prepared for the future? That this like, what's the worry?
This is any Laker fan has no room to complain. I mean, LA they got Kelsey Plum. Now they got Luka Doncic. Like it's popping off in LA. Everything's great. I don't want to hear any complaints.
All right. Well, let's get into our Florida warm up recap right now. And Edward Stevens joins us here on the pod. Edward, out of Athens, Georgia, looking great. Your background's better than ours.
Hey, it's just because of the books. Everybody thinks I read and listen to records, but it's all a sham. I just put it on for Deep Look.
It isn't true. Edward reads so much that he's typically up early in the morning reading before any of us are still getting up at a tournament. So, Edward, I hope you had a blast at warm up. How was the Gainesville experience? Just first things first.
While I didn't love, as I'm sure many of the teams didn't love, flying into Tampa and having to drive 2+ hours to get to Gainesville in the first place, the fields were great. The weather was better than great. It was as good a weather as I've ever been a part of in all my years of covering Ultimate. I mean, it was mid 70s, some wind on Friday, but very low wind Saturday and Sunday. Clear, sunny. Everybody was in great spirits. And, unlike at USF, where the games can be split between 2 or 3 different field sites on the South Florida campus, this was at a park in Gainesville where all of the fields were essentially right next to each other. There was one field that was slightly offset from the others, but everything was a short walk for each other, which meant that the sidelines were always packed. It was easy to feel like you were tuned into lots of different action at the same time. You could follow the cheers to figure out who was getting a break or who might be on, upset alert. It was a great tournament and a great time. And shout out in particular to tournament director Dario Milano for pivoting at the last second after being thrown a curveball to put this tournament on. It was excellent work.
Well, I've buried the lead for too long. Let's just talk about what happened here. Carleton wins the tournament 13-10 over UMass in the finals. Texas and Wash U, your other semifinalists. I want to start with Carleton right off the top, and then I'll let Keith start firing off some questions. But they go undefeated, 8-0. I'm really, really curious to hear why you think this team looks as good as it does now, and how much the rookies played a role in their success this weekend.
Carlton were great, and I wasn't sold on them right off the bat. Their Friday, they won all their games, but they looked a little rickety, especially against Brown, who, I'll have more thoughts on Brown later, but just on a clear talent level, they're not there at the same overall depth of talent that Cut have, and Cut are near the top of the division, and yet they were getting broken, struggling to score offensively, making lots of easy mistakes in the wind. And yeah, they won that game, but I was like, I don't know if this team actually has the juice. And then they had two easy games on Saturday before the playoffs started. So they finished 5-0 and were essentially at the top of the table, the 1 seed heading into the playoffs. And as soon as that quarterfinal round started, I saw them flip a switch, the likes of which I haven't seen from Cut for years and years and years. I wasn't covering the sport when they won their last national championship, or the year after when they were really strong and got beat in semis. And I've seen Cut be good, but I've never seen them attack and just be relentless the way they were as soon as the playoffs started here. They were phenomenal. And yeah, the rookies played a huge, huge role. Ellis Newhouse fit like a glove on offense. Nate DeMorgan, whether he was on offense or defense, he was primarily defense, but crossed over to offense against Brown when their offense had been struggling. And after Daniel Chen got hurt in the final, DeMorgan crossed over for the remainder of the game to that offense. He is looking like maybe the best rookie in the country. He's plug and play, immediate impact player. I loved everything I saw from him. Is a lefty, but throws righty hammers somehow, that was his turnover in the UMass game in the final, throwing a righty hammer. But yeah, he's awesome. Axel Olsen looks really good. Thomas Shope didn't play in the final, but from a defensive perspective, he's as advanced as they come. He was shutting down Tristan Yarder on Pittsburgh when they played in quarters, and I love everything I'm seeing from this Carleton team.
Easy to be excited about. For certainly it looked to me like Declan Miller and Daniel Chen were in kind of the driver's seat for that team, but a very still deep group and still very much developing. It still feels like they're a work in progress, and I felt like that was the case for a lot of the Florida warm-up teams. What did you feel like this Carleton team excelled at as they beat UMass in that final?
Spacing and timing on offense is something that doesn't always click for teams at the beginning of the season. It's something that they have to practice and figure out, but they looked great at it from the get-go, at least in the 3 playoff games that they played at warm-up. They're getting huge unders and huge deep cuts regularly, which shows not only that they have the throws and the athleticism to go out and win those matchups, but that as an entire group, they're working together to create opportunities for each other. And then the other thing I saw was that they are fast on defense and they are smart and coordinated on defense. Early in the Pittsburgh game, I was standing on the sidelines and Pittsburgh had scored a couple of deep goals, and it was close. They were like 4 points in. And I saw Coach Phil Bowen pull the defensive line aside and just say, hey, Tristan Yarder, who, by the way, was fantastic for Pittsburgh, said, Tristan Yarder is single-handedly beating us with his throws right now. You need to push him downfield at all costs. He's still good, but that is our assignment right now. That is the one thing we have to do as a defense. They immediately implemented it and immediately started getting breaks. So that kind of like discipline and focus is going to pay huge dividends for them down the road.
All right. Well, I want to talk about Brown. I mean, we got a lot of teams to get to, but they're a super interesting one coming into the season because, of course, they're coming off the national championship, but they lose some of the most important players in the division. We don't know what we're going to see from them, and definitely mixed results on the weekend. They don't make the bracket. They had a couple good wins, but they also had some head scratcher losses. Where do you feel like this team is right now? And does the fact that they go, win their final 4 games, make you feel any better about their weekend, given that they started off with 3 losses in their first 4?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about this. We didn't do any prep to talk about this in advance of the show, but I actually feel much better about Brown after the tournament than I did heading into the tournament. They did essentially exactly what they needed to, which was to establish who is in charge of the disc on offense and to keep working through those players and establish their plays. And it's the offense they run looks really similar to what they ran last year, where they have about 4 players who are primarily in control of the disc. This year it's Luca Duclo-Arcello, Emmett Young, um, rookie Nolan McCloskey, who's fantastic, and Jason Tapper, Jr. Those 4 are mostly around the disc, working it through each other. And then once they get into their red zone set, they kind of dare teams to leave their other 3 players unmarked, and we'll hit them with good shots. And then on defense, they ran some matchup, but were almost exclusively zone. And the idea is clearly to get every player who's going to play on the defensive line super familiar with their roles. And they look great doing it. When they need a break, they're definitely going to cross over 1 or 2 of their offensive players. So I love where they're at from a systems perspective. I love their athleticism out there. Again, they're usually one of the most sneaky athletic teams in the division just because they train so hard and work so hard. They go after every disc. They jump every potential short throw on a mark, so they get more blocks than you'll expect. And what I was most worried about was who's going to replace Jock and Leo, of course. And the answer is that this kid, Nolan McCloskey, a rookie out of the Philadelphia area, is, along with Nate DeMorgan, one of easily the best rookies in the country. I mean, he's A1 right now. He was dicing up the cut defense in their game on Friday. Didn't play on Saturday and had a reduced role on Sunday. He's kind of dealing with some injuries, so they're going to want to get him healthy, but he's the truth. I love it.
This year's rookie class, I think, is already looking very strong. I'm very curious about what the long-term outlook is, because it feels like players we thought were going to be the 10th, 15th, 20th best rookie in the class look already way ahead of schedule. So very, very curious about this rookie class. I want to pick your brain a little bit about this, because I want to ask you this question, and based on your answer, I'm gonna ask you the follow-up here. So who were the 3 best teams of this tournament, and in what order? Give me your 1, 2, 3 for the teams of this tournament.
Okay. Number 1, Carlton Cut, best team of the tournament. Number 3, UMass Zoodisk, and I feel like, they were the finalists, they're the runners-up, and I feel like they kind of stood in their own way from potentially being the best team at the tournament, with some real stupid errors that they need to clean up. And number 2, BYU Kai. BYU are back. That win over Cal Poly Slow at Santa Barbara Invite the week before was no mirage. This team is for real.
I think it's only the second time they've gone 8-0 at warm-up, and they've been really, really good in some of the years that they've lost games. Go ahead, Keith, with your follow-up.
I mean, y'all are basically getting at it. Like, tell me more about this BYU team that we really had a blind spot for after a fairly rough season last year, and it felt like maybe this program was taking a step back from being in the upper echelons of the division. But we're 2 tournaments into the season, and they look like a top 5 team. What's going on with BYU? Why are they back so strong?
I think the crazier question, the harder question to answer is, why weren't they very good in 2024? Because both eye test wise, I saw them at Florida warm up last year and I came away unimpressed. And then record wise, I just looked it up as I was working on my write up before our interview started here. They went 2-11 last year against teams that finished in our top 25 end of season. That's like an appallingly bad record considering the heights that they've hit in previous seasons. But this year, they look fantastic. They're big and huge and fast, and they lean into that. That's the first thing you notice about them. They bomb deep and they dare you to throw it deep on them, and they are going to get the blocks, whether it's after they've made a turnover on offense or to stop your offense, and they're going to put the disc back in the end zone quickly. And it doesn't always work out for them. Sometimes they miss. Sometimes they shoot too long, or the coverage from the other team is doubled up, or they miss in the wind. But they don't quit, and essentially they push on you harder than you push on them. And the most any team scored on them this week, and they hit 13 goals. They never got capped. The most any team scored on them was Wash U early on Saturday, scored 10. Nobody else scored more than 8. They beat up on Pittsburgh. They are, I think, a clear top 5 team in the country again this year, as they have been many years recently, with the exception of last year.
It's pretty crazy to see them go from so good to so average back to being so good. And obviously, this speaks very highly of how good Washington is, considering that's the one team that's beaten them this season. And I mean, we already knew the West Coast was going to be strong, but given the results from BYU this weekend, and given what we saw out on the West Coast at SBI, where BYU beat SLO, as you mentioned, and lost to Washington, like, how good is the West Coast, do you think? Like, I know you haven't seen those teams yet besides BYU. They're kind of always this early crossover team. But do we need to be talking about Washington as a possible top 5 team?
Possibly. I'd love to see a little more from them. I can't remember if they're going to be at Pres Day or not, or if we have to wait until Stanford or Northwest Challenge to get another look at them. Washington, in my mind, are definitely have the potential to be very good. I'm not, and this is partly because I haven't seen them in person, I'm not ready to say they are like a potential top 5 team yet, but they're way closer, clearly, than we realized at the start of the season.
To me, it's not that it's as, like, obviously it does say good things about Washington, but I think what we're learning, and maybe this is just wanting this to be true and wanting to confirm my priors, but that doesn't feel like anybody's going to be unbeatable this year. That we've got a big crop of teams, and even the teams, the tier 2, tier 3 teams, there's going to be a lot of tier crossover where you're seeing teams that can beat teams a tier above them. I think that we're in for a very exciting college season. I know we haven't really seen the full concept of Oregon yet. We haven't talked about UNC taking a loss to Georgia Tech, but they weren't playing with Van Dameron. UMass and Carleton both were playing with incomplete, without their full hands, so to speak, in the final. And I think we saw that from a number of teams. It's early in the season, but the start seems to imply to me that we have a very competitive group of teams, and it's very unclear exactly what we should expect from the elite level teams. Do you feel like that's fair, Edward?
Yeah, I think that anyone from the way it looks right now is basically anyone from 1 to 15 can win a game against each other on any given day. And sometimes that's true, for a particular matchup within the top 15. I feel like Oregon State is always going to give Oregon a great game for that entrance, for instance. And, Cal Poly has had a BYU bug bite them on more than one occasion in the past, but I feel like it's generally true across the top at this point this season.
All right. There's a bunch of stuff I want to get to, but I have to start here. Are you feeling more or less like the coaching staff of Team USA blew it by not taking Xavier Fuzat onto a U24 roster for this summer?
How could I possibly feel more like they blew it than I already did when I got the news? Yeah, Fuzat was unreal. He is I hesitate to say he was necessarily the most effective player at the tournament. I might give that to Declan Miller instead from Carlton Cut. But Fuzat plays faster. He has a more interesting bag of throws, as I think many people have seen from the clip of his perfect thumber into the end zone for one of Texas's goals this weekend. And he like busts out hex offense moves at times. You'll see him get the disc on an under, and instead of turning upfield, he will, on stall 0.5, dump it 15 yards back, immediately bust further up line to get himself more horizontal field space to just break the defense's back. He jumps higher than almost everybody at the tournament. Shout out Simon Daystrup of BYU and Gavin Abramson of UMass, who are probably the two highest jumpers there. He's got the closing speed of, I don't know, a charging rhino. What's the metaphor at this point for how good this guy is? Yeah, huge miss from the U24 team. It's going to be all over the tape. Texas is going to show it all season long.
All right, I want to hear a little bit more about UMass. I feel like we haven't given them enough time yet. You said they might have been the best team if it weren't for some unfortunate turnovers. What are you seeing? Because I want UMass in the context of where they've been the past couple seasons, because we saw them come close to a title and fall short, and then they kind of missed expectations a little bit last year, I would say. Where are they now? You know, they have these rookies coming in who are super good. They've had this nice pipeline for a few years now. What is the identity of this UMass team relative to what we've seen the past couple seasons?
I mean, the talent on an individual level is just as good, if not better, than in the past few seasons. You know, for the fourth straight year in a row, I think that they are likely to have a player on the Rookie of the Year podium, and maybe also, again, the breakout player of the year podium. Mason Stone, who has been playing mostly D-line for them and got hurt early on in the final, and Rowan Dunkerley, who has been playing mostly O-line for them, are clearly, alongside, you know, DeMorgan and McCloskey, who I already mentioned, two of the best rookies in the country. And they're going to get feature roles and continue to make plays. Ethan Lehman might be the best offensive player in the country. Certainly was the most impressive pure cutter I saw at the tournament. You know, he gets open on virtually everybody, virtually all of the time. Shout out to Cuts Ryan Ducer for making him work hard in the final, though. Ducer did an awesome job on defense on him. And Gavin Abramson is like a do-everything guy. And then they've got a million players who just do an awesome individual job and step up in a huge way beyond that. You know, Nima Lama and Callan Kirkpatrick really stood out to me on defense. So talent-wise, they're there. I haven't even mentioned Kayla McSweeney, Carter Hawkins. You know, they're great. They're so deep. They're so great. And number one, they lost games this weekend. They might have lost the Carleton game anyway, but they certainly lost the Georgia game this weekend because their D-line just kind of flubbed it on many break opportunities down the stretch. And you'd like to see them fix those mistakes. And then again, in the final, you know, they had some weird blank out mistakes. Luca Harwood dropped a pass that was straight at his hands. Gavin Abramson had a couple of like bizarre moments on deep plays late in the game. And those things you expect them to clean up. I still wonder where their killer instinct is as a team. And that's my biggest question mark about where their ceiling can be. I think it was their biggest flaw last season was that they couldn't quite finish the drill and just kind of dismantle the opponent completely. They always left them breathing room. And I saw a little bit of that this weekend. You want to see what you saw from Carleton, which is that they were going to absolutely dominate every point or break their backs trying. And then, of course, there's the caveat, which is that Wyatt Kellman, who could be the best player in college, was not playing. He's decided to spend most of the regular season recovering. He might rejoin the team at Easterns, maybe at regionals. We don't know yet. Hopefully he'll be healthy later on. He will certainly be a difference maker and push everybody down on the depth chart, either on offense or defense.
Injuries have been a huge problem for this team. I mean, Stang Osborne, another one.
Oh, breaks my heart.
They're really impressive, though. I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that the McSweeney Hawkins duo is the best offensive handler duo that I've seen perform this year. I don't know if we'll feel that way come the end of the year, but thus far, I'm not sure I've seen a pair of handlers operate more as the quarterbacks. It's like having two quarterbacks. It feels like it should be allowed. But this is a very deep, exciting team, and very, very, very much a title contender. I'm curious on the other end. Which team were you the most disappointed by at Florida warm up? There were definitely, there were a lot of great performances, but we saw some teams lay some eggs with some surprising losses along the way.
I'd say that's probably a tie between Georgia and Minnesota. And Georgia, and this is partly because I saw them at CCC and partly because living in Athens, I know all those guys. I have a better sense of going in, and they still made quarterfinals. They knocked off UMass. But I loved what I saw at times from them when they were scoring goals in 1, 2, 3 throws. They had a sequence against Texas when they played in pool play where the first 4 goals on offense they scored in a total of 10 throws. So they have the deep game on lock. But when Texas started to take away that deep game, Georgia showed that they weren't totally prepared to work the field in any other way reliably. Like they would start to make mistakes, kind of attempt throws that were a little bit out of their difficulty range in short windows. So I didn't like that. And I think that's going to hamper their ceiling this year, as opposed to last year when they had as high a ceiling as any team in the country. And, part of that's because of roster turnover. And it's the same story with Minnesota, who I frankly expected to at least cruise to a second bid in the North Central. Now, not only am I worried that they're not going to get the bid, but they also lost to Wisconsin in the second tier bracket down. And I'm not sure they're even the second best team in the North Central anymore. And, they graduated Anthony Gurley. They graduated Paul Krennic, and the guys behind them, some of them look really good. Gabe Yacht looks phenomenal. Austin Jin, who was, on our breakout player podium last year, had a wonderful tournament. Levi Doman's playing really well, but it's not enough right now. And on top of that, they had the horrible misfortune of Max Dillon breaking his arm during one of the games this weekend. Max Dillon you can put him downfield, but he's also a great handler presence. And I don't know how long he's going to be out. At the bare minimum, I assume he's not going to be back in time for Smoky Mountain Invite, which is one of the times when they would get a chance to kind of recoup any rankings points they've lost. And I think they're at serious risk, not only losing their name, Grey Duck, but of also losing their spot at Nationals.
Wow. You think projecting ahead, Wisconsin beats Minnesota at regionals?
I think it's a shot. Wisconsin looked not great, but they look pretty good. Saul Diaz is coming into his own as a thrower, and I've mentioned a bunch of rookies. We've talked about this rookie class.
Yeah, Zach Morton
and
time.
Wisconsin. I know, yeah. Wisconsin are going to, probably spend a lot of this season out of the spotlight, but Zach Morton looks like the real deal. They kind of start him, they're treating him like an A1 cutter downfield on the offense, and he's got everything. He's so smooth out there, and could be the kind of player they can build a team around again. So yeah, watch out for Wisconsin. They could beat Minnesota.
You've been hyping up some rookies.
Yeah.
But I want to point out that Michael in the chat says Sam Grossberg is the A1 rookie, and it's not close. Sam Grossberg playing for Georgia Tech, not in attendance this weekend. Surprising omission from Florida warm-up. The word is that they applied, I guess didn't get in. I don't know. Either way, they played at kickoff, and what did they do? They won the tournament, including beating UNC 15-14 in quarters. I know you weren't there. What are your thoughts on Tech's weekend and knowing what you do know, what it means that they beat a admittedly Ben Dameron-less UNC?
I think it says more about UNC than it does about Georgia Tech. I am Ben Dameron's huge. Obviously, it's like Wyatt Kellman. If you're not on the field, it's such a change from the way it'll work when Dameron is on the field that it's almost hard to judge. But you're looking at players like Kevin Pignon and Matt Barcelos and Eli Freed and Grayson Trowbridge, and that group, I don't know who all was playing or wasn't playing. Maybe somebody was injured or something, but like that's a group that has been in semifinals every year they've been in school. They've won 3 titles. Well, some of them I think maybe Trowbridge only 2 at this point. But that's a group that should be able to handle Georgia Tech, even a Georgia Tech that, has a few incredibly good players, as good as Sam and Adam Grossberg undoubtedly are. And I've seen a lot of Adam Grossberg over the years. I haven't seen Sam in person yet, since maybe some of his time on AMP when he was not quite as featured of a player. But you should know how to stop a 2-3 man game. Nikos Verlinden's really good for Tech too, and Neil Berry. But I don't know. I think it was just an early season stumble for North Carolina, and Georgia Tech, as good as they are, were not like crazy ahead of the other top teams at the tournament. And they lost their first rounder to Virginia to start the weekend. So, very excited for them. Obviously, huge talent in the Grossbergs, but I would pump the brakes until we get to see them later on in the season.
I did see come across our Discord that they did get a no Grossberg break on UNC, which is like what's going on out there. But I agree that it probably says a lot about UNC more than it does about Georgia Tech. But again, goes back to my point that we're in a year where even the top teams are vulnerable. I want to go back to warm up. Who's a player? We've name dropped a lot of names in this segment. Who's a player who maybe you didn't know at all, or who you knew a little bit, or you had a lower estimation of, but after this weekend you're like, wow, I can't believe what this player was up to. Who's somebody who came out and shocked you at warm up?
I got 2 names, and they're from 2 of the kind of shocking teams. Not shocking in the overall sense, but were much better than I realized they would be. And they're kind of smaller programs. Actually, I got 3 names. So first off, I want to start with the third name. Her name just occurred to me, and I don't know if y'all caught the pronoun there, her, but Maya List, who is a third-year player at McGill, spent 2 years playing on the women's team, is playing with the men's team this season because the Canadian Ultimate Championships wrap up in October, and then there's no competitive ultimate there the rest of the year unless those teams want to play the U.S. series. And since McGill does, she went out for a spot on the team and made it. So she's reasonably young, and she played Toronto Sixers in club last year, was a real down roster player for them, but was at nationals. And she's out there and she looks great. Her speed and footwork and finishing skills are top notch. I got real positive words about her from Brown coach Jake Smart, who Brown beat McGill on Universe in the 9th place bracket on Saturday or Sunday. Said she scored a couple goals on them. As I was walking by when they were playing Texas A&M, I saw her sprinting toward the back of the end zone. She'd gotten open. They put up a throw to her, and she did like a huge double-handed, two-handed layout catch for a score. And I don't know. I think I don't know how big an impact she is going to have on the college season this year, but as a player to watch in general, you cannot go wrong with watching my list. And I was talking to Brody Brotman, a historian and a photographer, and we were both saying we cannot remember the last time we saw a female matching player playing in the men's division of Florida warm-up. So that was super cool. And then on to the surprising teams and surprising players. I want to shout out Luke Kim from Emory and Milo Rappaport from Cornell. Cornell, I knew they had a couple of really good players. Davitt Chan remains one of the best players in the division, and they are surprisingly deep around them. And one of the big reasons for that is a sophomore named Milo Rappaport. He made so many huge plays for them this weekend. They were kicking around late, almost trying to make it into the quarterfinal bracket. They had a chance to beat Utah State and go 3-2 on the weekend, which would have put them in the conversation. And late in the game, they got a break, or I guess it was late in the first half when Milo Rappaport got a layout Callahan. He was bodying players all weekend long. You'd love to see that from a program like Cornell, and I think it makes the Metro East really interesting because they could beat Ottawa. And then Luke Kim for Emory is the guy they centered the disc to on offense. And he is just an absolute sniper with the disc. Maybe the best blades at the whole tournament. He's throwing assist after assist, just gorgeous shape on every forehand that he throws. Good backhands too, and Emory too were surprisingly deep. They did finish 3-2, and missed out on the rankings calculations to get into quarters. But they beat Brown on Saturday, and they look good doing it. And yeah, they could make the Southeast kind of interesting. I don't think they're favorites against Georgia or Georgia Tech or anything like that, but they could end up being the third best team and have a shot in any of these games.
All right. Who from this tournament could be a semifinalist at College Nationals?
100%.
Go ahead.
Oh, wait. Did you want to clarify the
question? I was just going to say you can take some of the obvious teams. I mean, you're going to say Carleton, UMass. Like we know that, but go for it.
Carleton could, UMass could, BYU could if USAU decided to figure out a way to accommodate them. I know it would be tricky, but gosh, I want to see them at College Nationals. And beyond that, I think that Texas, Pittsburgh, and WashU are the only three other teams that I could personally see reaching semis at Nationals. And they would be long shots, but I think all of them actually have the juice to do it.
It is a failure of imagination for USAU to continue not to find a way to make it work for BYU. That's all I'm going to say. They have elite teams in both divisions. It could be done. All right, Edward, this has been fantastic. We could probably spend hours going through every team. But I just want, can you zoom out for us? What did you learn from this year's warm-up relative to the past? Do we have a really clear top set of teams? Does it feel like more of a mishmash? What is the big picture takeaway for the overall college season?
I think that I know I listed a bunch of teams, like 5 or 6, depending on if you count BYU, who could be semifinalists. But my takeaway is that there is actually a clear step down between who could win a championship and who could not. Because winning a championship and making semis are two different things. You have to win all the way through the bracket at College Nationals to be a champion. And I know we've talked about, it seems like in the top 15, any given game, any of these teams can beat each other. But in terms of having the consistency and the drive to do it game after game after game, from this tournament, I think it's only UMass and Cut. And I think there's only 3 or 4 other teams in the country who can also do that game after game after game and win a championship. So huge, like, parity in terms of single game, but championship there's still a shelf in my mind.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Always great to have you on the show, and sometimes hosting the show when I'm out. Appreciate you being with us.
Thanks, y'all. It's been good.
Edward Stevens with us here on Deep Look. We are going to take a break. When we come back, small ball and more. Stay with us. Welcome back to Deep Look. Before we go any further, I've got to tell you a little bit more about the National Ultimate Training Camp. Keith.
Yeah, we want to tell you about National Ultimate Training Camp and their program, the Global Ultimate Training School, or GUTS, and they're in full swing. And these online panel presentations have been helping people learn more about topics they care about in Ultimate. I think last night they had their college recruiting panel, which included my own Wesleyan. So if you're a young player thinking about where to go, Wesleyan could be a spot for you. And tonight,
I see you
they're hosting
hustling,
an
Keith.
evening with Mitch Dengler. There we go. Gotta get the plugs in where I can. They're having a evening with Mitch Dengler, which will focus all about rules that are commonly misunderstood. But what's coming after tonight's presentation? Well, Tuesday, February 11th, you'll get a chance to learn about how to find success in the business of Ultimate from some people who know, including our own Charlie. You'll be on that panel. Are you excited?
I am, yes. Me, Tina Booth, who's the founder of Nutsy, of course, and Roan McDonald, as well as Adriana Withers. Is Adriana still going to show up? Canadians are feeling a type of way about the Americans right now. So, and I understand, but should be a lot of fun. I'm excited to just talk shop. I mean, I haven't sat down and had like a panel discussion like this about business and Ultimate, maybe ever. It's a small industry, but I'm super excited and some really like unique perspectives, I think.
Yeah, and on after that panel on February 18th, you can learn about how to try out from some of the best coaches in the world: Brian Jones, Miranda Roth Knowles, Daryl Stanley, Manisha Daryani. They'll be a part of that panel. You can see the full schedule and register at nutsy.net/winter-courses. That's winter-courses. And the National Ultimate Training Camp is celebrating their 25th year this year. There's no better place for young players to make memories, new friends, and tremendous strides in their game. I can say so as a camper myself. I have a lot of great memories from there. Proceeds from the Global Ultimate Training School go directly into the Nutsy Scholarship Fund to help other young players gain access and contribute to that awesome experience. And get ready for Nutsy. It's coming up this summer. Registration opens on February 28th. Thank you to our friends over at Nutsy.
Awesome. All right. Let's just a quick note. We're to the semifinals of our Catch of the Year bracket. So make sure you go over and make your voice heard. Check out some of the best catches of the year and vote in the semis to see who's going to make the finals. Getting on to the nitty gritty here. Keith, what's your pick from the semifinalists? Or is your pick already eliminated?
Y'all have done wrong. I can't believe you eliminated Don Colton in the first round. I know it's a strip. It doesn't look as good on film.
I'm sorry,
but
it was a
I know
strip.
context.
I get it.
Know the context. Know the
No, but I don't.
context. Come on,
It's
folks.
just
This is a
you gotta
legendary
hold
play.
on to
This is
it.
going to go down in the annals of Ultimate history. You can't eliminate it in round one.
I'm sorry.
I,
Visual appeal is a
I'll
big
be
part of this,
onward.
Keith.
I know, and I have no idea what's going to win. I think if I had to peg, like, there's part of me that thinks that like the subscribers, if they were picking from these four, the Rafi Hayes clip would win. But the Charles Patterson and Annalise Collin clips have both been doing very, very well. So I'm really at a loss. And that Le Chasseur play was one of the most popular plays on Instagram that we ever posted, period. So I'm very unsure of who's going to win from these final four.
Well, make sure you go vote, and if you wanna ruin Keith's day again, then make sure to eliminate the one that he's hoping for. All right, let's see. What do we got? We got small ball. It's time to play a little small ball. We haven't done it in a while. We got a bunch of topics to tackle. So, Keith, what's up first?
There's some semi-pro news to discuss that we haven't really gotten to. It's worth noting that we got the UFA Championship weekend. That's going to be in Madison. Western Ultimate League finished with their Mega Fan sponsorship program that they ran. Had the split jerseys. I think there were probably split opinions on the like half home, half away look for some of their special jackets. Those are a unique one. And then we've started to see player news dropping across all the different leagues from, the Gridlock. They've got Yina Cartagena back, Jenna De Jesus. But of course, the big question is, are they going to have Manu Avale this year? I haven't seen Jolie Krebs' name yet either. Like, who's going to be back for them? And they defend their title. Any news that's jumped out to you, Charlie?
Well, I mean, that's all big stuff. I think, I mentioned earlier, Pavel Giannis going back to Chicago, and Chicago kind of like getting the band back together and even like sniping some pieces that you wouldn't expect, like Brandon Van Dusen going to play with Chicago. I got to text Brandon. Is he moving to Chicago, or did he just get signed? Like, it's starting to feel like the UFA where you are seeing players like signing with teams that don't necessarily make geographic sense. And I feel like that's a really healthy thing for a league overall. It's like how you're going to end up with actual meaningful contracts at some point. But we're not there yet because Pavel had a 6-year deal with LA and bye-bye, and now has a new deal with Chicago. And I get it. This is not Luka AD stuff yet. But Chicago looking super competitive in the Central. Are they going to take the title away from Minnesota out there and make championship weekend? Should be an interesting year. I feel like there's, with the Empire feeling like they're probably going to take a little bit of a step back. We haven't seen their full roster either. It's just going to be compelling with Chicago like getting back into the mix in the Central.
Yeah, and we also got the UFA showcase schedule out, which leads off with New York traveling to play the new Vegas Bighorns in Vegas. New York also featured 4 times across the schedule. I guess the league is like, we're leaning hard into the Empire, even if they may take a step back, even if it may be Boston or DC that's ruling the East. They're still leaning into the brand. I can't believe this opener though at Vegas.
I mean, look, here's what I'll say. Is it going to be a good game? Probably not. Is New York like a minus? We haven't seen rosters yet, but like if you just had to make a line today, New York -6, like it's going to be a heavy spread in New York's favor. But are you going to tune in and watch? I'm going to tune in and watch. Like everyone's going to want to see what's up with this Vegas team, and maybe they're going to turn it off at halftime, but they're going to tune in.
I might sign in if we were doing Bets Perspectives still. I would have loved writing about this, but it's in Vegas. I mean, I think that they were like, okay, we can put the Empire brand in there. The Empire, like, we're willing to spend, and the Empire leadership players were like, we want to hang out in Vegas for the weekend.
Hell yeah.
I did half jokingly say, we were like, oh, who's going to travel on the road to Vegas? So I was like, maybe everybody. Everybody's going to be like, I'm not missing the Vegas road trip. So they're going to get the toughest home games, period. But this is a bit silly. I don't, I think it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But an interesting UFA showcase schedule that we've also seen. The we've also seen some rosters coming out. Pretty much the entirety of the rosters for the Western Ultimate League. They got Kennedy McCarthy and Megan Maxfield joining the reigning champions Colorado out there. Robin Fennig with the Falcons. So there's some interesting news coming out to wrap up on the pro leagues. We'll dive in fuller as we get closer to the season and we start to get full rosters across. I mean, we're about 6 weeks, 7 weeks away from the start of the Western Ultimate League, so still much to come there. You can also check out Double Overtime, which is returned. They're breaking down everything you want to know about the PUL and WUL. So make sure you're checking out Double Overtime if you want to get more news on that too.
Keith, the World Games first round tryouts for Team USA took place this past weekend in San Antonio. And of course, they make a first round of cuts. They have a second tryout. I mean, this is quite the process. Then you got to make the team. They used to take a short list of 20 and then cut it down to 14. Now they just cut it straight to 14 and they name alternates in case of an injury or something like that, which is a lot less brutal for the players who make the short list and then didn't make the team. What have you been hearing about how the tryouts went before we get to this next round here in a few weeks?
I heard tryouts were tough. It was warm in San Antonio. It was dry, so if you were hitting the ground, you were getting up with some marks. It was definitely dusty down there, and I think this maybe was less physically demanding than some of the other tryouts like WC, where it's like a grindhouse. Like they're trying to wear you out. I think it might have been like somewhat less physically demanding than that. But I think that I've heard a lot of good things about a lot of the returners, to be honest. Even Dylan Freechild playing well, Kayla Heldon. Definitely heard that the returners mostly looked pretty good, and that can make it tough to hit those new spots. I forget what the line our producer Lindsay Sue had in our bold predictions. It was like, what was it, like under 3.5 or something? Returners,
I think so.
Or something like that.
It's very
So
looking increasingly bold.
That might be in jeopardy. So yeah, there were some reports of a couple players. Angela Zhu, I think a player who's that live player. I'm trying to think of other names that
Marquez Brownlee.
I know you've basically like gone all in on that.
I'm going to be vindicated in the
obviously,
end.
We're at the point where we like fully know some people who are not participating in the process. Jeff Babbitt wasn't at tryouts. No Nate Goff at tryouts. So there's open spots for maybe a big man. Maybe that's a position that we could fill. It'll be an interesting process from here because like you mentioned, there's a cut down, and it sounds like there was a lot of talent. I think that much like with U24, I mean, they're clearly there's going to be so many players that you're going to leave off some good players, but I think they're going to get to the fringes of the roster, those last 4 spots, and have a lot of optionality where like there isn't necessarily a wrong choice, but it's what do you want to fill these spots with? And I think that'll make it so they're really open up the door for surprises.
Yeah. I mean, it's also worth noting, there's some big names apparently did not try out. No Jeff Babbitt, Keith. Sam Little didn't try out. Cam Warner didn't try out. Jabron Meeser didn't try out. That's just a couple things coming from the Ulti World Discord. So it's hard until I want to see the round 2 short list, like the second round tryout. And we're going to do everything we can to have a reporter there so that we can get some inside thoughts on, who looks good. But you can see why people maybe wouldn't want to try out, right? It's a serious commitment. Even if it's not as financially costly as playing Worlds, because a lot more of the costs are covered. Maybe all of the costs are covered by USA Ultimate and like, this is like a big international tournament. But you got to go to China in August for like over a week. You have to do 2 tryouts, and that's all coming out of pocket. It's a lot. It's a lot to have to commit to, to buy tickets for a second tryout. Like getting plane tickets is not going to be cheap. So we'll see what we end up getting for the second tryout. What's next in small ball, Keith?
All right. We talked a little bit about Vegas earlier, Charlie, the new UFA franchise, and they've got their new head coach. This one, I maybe equally surprising to Luka Doncic getting traded, right? Did you see this pick coming? Matt Bode announced as the head coach, the first ever head coach of the Vegas Bighorns.
Wild. Matt Bode, something of a UFA legend. How many teams did he play for? He played for New York, Jacksonville, Charlotte, Raleigh, and Tampa. His last season was 2021. He's a great player. Kind of a lunatic on the field. Really nice guy off the field. I guess professional poker player, maybe semi-pro poker player. But a very serious poker player. And now going to be coaching. Like I have no idea what to expect. It's completely crazy. He had some very productive UFA seasons though. Like he was in New York in 2014, 32 assists, 28 goals, 12 blocks. He was one of the best players in the league.
The getting the poker playing head coach makes me think Vegas is going to go. I can't believe they're named the Bighorns and not some gambling reference, because I feel like they're going to go. It's going to be like, we're all in this season.
Like
they're going to do
their
2 best players are going to be pocket aces. Like this is what they're going to do all year long. They're just leading into it.
I would never imagine Bode as a coach. Just saying.
I mean, it's hard. Like you said, a lot of people's on-field personality and off-field personality are just very different.
Yes, that for sure. All right, let's get to last week's picks. How'd we do at Florida warm-up? Keith, did we excel? I don't think either of us picked Carleton.
Well, I picked Carleton to. I was the only one of us between us and the subscribers to even pick Carleton to make semis, and I had them in the final. So I get some finalist points for my effort, but nobody got the winner right. You and I both had UMass, and the subscribers had Brown taking the W. And so we had a lot of misses. Michigan and for both me and the subscribers making it to semis and beyond. The subscribers. I mean, we said if the subscribers got anything right, we were going to be surprised. So that was a big miss, and we were razzing the subscriber over the course of the weekend as those Florida teams didn't win any games. Thinking of the semis was
we didn't even
the
Florida teams were so bad we didn't even ask Edward about it. Like you scroll down, the only 0-5 teams from match play are the Florida teams. It is brutal.
Yeah, it's tough sledding out here.
What's more brutal is the subscriber picks for this week. I mean, disgusting, horrendous picks. But good. You know what? Go out on a limb. It's high risk, high reward.
And I'll get all the points squared away, and we can get our final point totals as well. But we actually get a week off this week. No big tournaments that we're doing picks for this week.
Okie doke. That brings us to our mailbag question of the week. Before we wrap it up, I'll read it today. This one comes from Jonathan, and he asks, "As a college," this is from the Ulti World Discord, which, by the way, is now available to all Ulti World subscribers at any level. So if you're a mini sub, you just want to get the deep look subscriber bonuses and exclusive articles, stuff like that, you can get into the Discord now. But you might as well upgrade to a standard or an all access sub. Get all this great video coming your way all college season long and into the club season coming up. Here's a question from Jonathan. Has the college regular season gotten a bit predictable the past few years? It seems like a majority of the elite teams go to Florida warm-up, SMI, and Easterns, talking men's division. seems similar to the TCT in club. Would be cool to see some elite teams to other tourneys. You could potentially see more upsets like Georgia Tech had over UNC if there were more tournaments like Carolina Kickoff that had a mix of strong regionals and nationals teams. I would think there would be three benefits. One, regionals level teams getting reps against better teams, potentially helping them get better. Number two, allowing the elite teams to play and develop more of their depth instead of playing at a mini nationals. And number three, it could make the algorithm and bids even more interesting. It's very hard to earn a bid now if you don't play in the big three unless you destroy everyone. And I think was that
I'm not
second one
sure
a
that
comment, a response? I think that second part from the 1, 2, 3 was a response from Discord.
no.
So
That
I
was
apologize.
all from Ramel. But
Oh, okay.
I not sure that I quite see the same thing. Like I get that like it feels like, oh, we saw some big upsets at warm up and at kickoff, but like to me, that the system is working as intended, right? Like I do think that we're seeing that stuff, and yeah, there's kind of an elite circuit, but I think the biggest thing is that I don't know that I buy number two. Do elite teams are not saying like, oh, our schedule, we would be better off if we could, play some more depth and play some worse teams. Like that is a challenge that exists beyond even college and club, right? We've had conversations about, do we need more regional level play in club? And one of the big challenges is that it's not beneficial for the elite teams in a lot of cases. They don't need to go out and win 13-4 and play their deep bench a lot. They have practice for those players to get better. They don't need that. They need to play the best teams as possible in most cases because reps are limited and you need to be prepared to play against the best competition. So I don't think that elite teams would want that if they were like, let's imagine it was you're restricted to play, you couldn't fly for more than once per season. Like imagine some scenario like that or something like that. Like it's not going to help those teams get better. It would potentially benefit the regional level teams. But we've also seen that a lot of teams don't actually want this in full. They want to get like a shot or two because they dream of getting the big upset or being hyper competitive with the really good teams. But when those regional level teams go out and they lose 13-4, 13-3, they get sick of it really fast. They're like, I would like to play some more teams at our level. This is not fun, even if maybe it's helping
Right.
make us better. So I don't think that there's a big problem here. I think the regular season in college is actually pretty exciting. And the examples of upsets that we've seen are a sign that things are going the right direction. And that I don't know that people would actually want this. It maybe from a spectator standpoint, we would want this, but I think there's a pretty good amount of crossover as is. We see teams popping up and coming in and out of the fray each year. So I think the algorithmic question, not having to wonder about the bubble teams that haven't really played anybody, maybe played one good game, like that would feel good as a spectator and potentially from a fairness and competitive standpoint. But to me, you could achieve that effect with changes to the algorithm and the bid distributions rather than to the structure of the season.
Let me address the overall point. Is the season more predictable now? No, I don't think so. I mean, look at this weekend. We knew Georgia Tech was going to be pretty good, but would you predict them to beat UNC in quarterfinals? We knew Carleton had a great rookie class. Did you predict them to win the tournament? No, literally only one of the three people making picks even picked Carleton to make the finals. So, like, yeah, you kind of know based on how a team did last season and what their pickups are and what the changes to their roster are, like relatively how good a team is going to be, whether they're going to be like a fringy nationals team or they're going to be a quarterfinalist, maybe semifinalist, or they're going to be a title contender. But we still miss big on teams all the time coming into the season. I mean, look at BYU is a perfect example. I feel like you're never going to have total unpredictability. There are programs that are better than others. You're not going to have these stunning teams come out of nowhere and be awesome. I mean, it does happen, but it's rare. Usually you can start to see it coming over the course of a couple seasons because if a team gets a couple really good rookies, you're going to start to see, oh, wow, they did better at regionals than we thought they were going to. Oh, maybe this team is going to knock on the door of getting a nationals bid this year. You think about past teams that have done that have kind of come up from not being that great to being really good, Harvard or Texas A&M, or there's a zillion teams. So I think the other thing is like there is a mix of regionals and nationals team at most tournaments. And if you want to play at Easterns and you're a regionals team and you're not getting a bid automatically because you weren't good enough last year, well, you can go to Easterns qualifier and play your way in. I mean, SMI doesn't have that, but they still have a regionals team. They got Tennessee there every year because they host.
And is that benefiting? Do we feel? Have we seen big
they get
strides from the Tennessee program?
destroyed. They
It
get
has
absolutely
Tennessee
smoked.
scored a bunch of big right. If
No.
you were taking SMI and cutting off, I don't know, 6 of the travel teams and replacing them with regional level teams, the tournament would not be more unpredictable. It would be less unpredictable. You would just make it more and more likely that the best teams are going to finish and win the tournament. I know UNC just lost to Georgia Tech, but kickoff is a great example. If kickoff is the shining, like, this is a beacon, guess what? Almost every year, kickoff is the same. UNC gets to the final, they play NC State, and they win. Like, kickoff has been the same for forever. This is an example of what a regional level tournament with some elite teams at it would look like.
Yeah. I think if you start following the division really close, then it can feel more predictable because you are paying attention and you like know kind of who's going to be good and who's not. But like the fun of it is in the margins. It's like, who actually is the title contending list? Like, oh wow, Washington is like maybe way better than we thought in the men's division. And like those are the intriguing stories. It's just very rare to have a team come completely out of nowhere. But when it does happen, and it does happen, it's a lot of fun. It basically never happens in club. And so that's a big difference with college. Like you have teams make a stunning run because they, and to the other point here, it's not advantageous from a bids perspective to go to these elite tournaments as a mid-tier team. It's just not. You're better off crushing bad teams. There's a well-known, documented bias in the algorithm. You can Google it and read about it on UltiWorld. So,
and it's bad for right now, as the way the system is structured. It would be bad for elite teams to go to tournaments with lower quality competition, because in any of those games, like, you have to blow the other team out. You like basically have to erase it from your entire system. I mean, we saw last year a team lose a bid because they went to too low quality of a tournament and didn't blow everybody out in Notre Dame.
Right.
So, yeah, the teams are not incentivized to do that.
I think that like if you're a regionals level team that wants to get good competition, you can find it. Like this is, I mean, it's ancient history now, but like when I was at NYU, we were like, hey, we're going to go to Queen City. That's a long ass trip from New York City. But they let us in and we were one of the worst teams there. And it was a good experience. And like, we were right at the level where like we were an appropriate team to be at that tournament. And I think if teams want to seek it out, they generally can get into these early season bigger tournaments like kickoff or warm up or SBI. And if you want to play into the higher tournaments, you have to qualify in. And those options exist at most of the big tournaments.
Love the college.
All right, I guess that's
season, man. I love it.
Everybody give us a like and a subscribe. And we very much appreciate you being with us here live in the chat every week. Vicious cough. Hopefully I covered that most of the show. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we will talk to you next Tuesday at noon Eastern right here on YouTube. Don't miss our sub bonus. We're talking about the regional sectional redraw.